if we look like we haven't a cent to our names, if we look messy and dirty, and if we look unkempt, as some people seem to think it's necessary to do if they're going to be spiritual, and sometimes I hate that word because it has sometimes so definitely the wrong connotation, then the people with whom we are thrown in our everyday life are not going to be attracted to Swami's message. And he has made comments through the years to bolster up my courage along these lines, because as I told you, I wasn't a very brave person. And we have to be brave. We have to be courageous. We have to listen to Baba's message in our hearts. And then no matter what someone else says to us, it can be somebody even in the organization, we've got to listen to what Swami says to us, because he has a message that's individual for each one of us. And he knows what our karma is. He knows what we have to learn. And each life gives us a golden opportunity to learn whatever we haven't learned before, to become conscious of the things of which we're unconscious in ourselves. So he knows what each one of us needs. And if we really ask, he will show us in such interesting ways, like this one I've just recounted to you. So, what does Baba do? He's got me to the point where I'm willing to be part of the group in which I'm thrown. My husband was a lawyer, so if I turned up in bare feet and unkempt hair and a dirty dress, I would stick out like a sore thumb in the group in which I'm thrown. And that's not what Swami wants. We have to be part of the group wherever our lives bring us. To not be extravagant, not stick out like a sore thumb in the opposite direction, not bring attention to ourselves in any way in a flamboyant fashion, but blend in sufficiently, but modestly, so that we won't attract attention by our appearance, but people will accept us. They will take us seriously. And then comes the next step, which is very, very difficult, and that is to continue to practice what he teaches us in the midst of the most material world. That is the hard lesson. And I know when I was talking to the young people the other day, they brought that up. And that's where he has to make us very, very strong. And some of the tests that he has given us, and is still giving us, are intended to strengthen us, because we have to be willing, we have to find our security within, in the Baba, in our hearts. I'll never forget the first time I went to him at the farewell meeting, when in my ignorance, not knowing quite what was the protocol, I asked him, Swami, when do you want us to come back? And he said, quite fiercely, pointing his finger like an old school teacher, you don't have to come back to see this little body, pointing to himself. And then he paused to let that sink in, while I thought, oh, am I not going to be able to come back? Because I'd already been hooked by that time. And I had to give up that wish. It's okay if you don't want me to come back. That was hard. And he let me worry about it with a long pause. And he said, first you must find me in your own heart. So that was my first ever message from Swami. And it's a terribly important one, because that makes us strong. That makes us resilient. That makes us able to resist all of the temptations, all of the coercion, all of the control. And as you know, the work that I've been involved with in for so many years has taught that. And I was overjoyed when I first went to Swami, because I was very worried about suddenly finding here was another master, but outside of me. But it was wonderful to see that every word he said during that first year and thereafter has been exactly the same that I had been taught from the inner level. So obviously, Baba had been teaching me long before I knew that he was here in physical form. And probably that's why he said, when he first saw me, "So you have come at last." So we have to fit in to our surroundings. We have to fit in to the position that life has given us, because we wouldn't be there if that wasn't supposed to be where we were. But, and it's a big but, we have to be the yeast. We have to stay with his teachings. We have to demonstrate them, not flamboyantly, not thrusting them down people's throats, not trying to make them do what we're doing, but just letting Swami come through us, letting him, as I said the other day, think through us all day, feel through us all day, speak through us all day, act through us all day, and love through us all day. And that's very hard. It is not the least bit easy, and we forget, and we forget, and we forget. But instead of getting guilty and thinking, "Oh, I'm no good, it's just impossible, I can't do it, I'm a sinner," no, that's a waste of time and energy. The best thing to do is say, "Oops, I forgot, sorry Swami," and pick yourself up and say, "No, please help me." Because those mistakes we make can remind us that we're forgetting him. And we all forget all day long, because our lives are so hurried, they're so full, and they're full of the material world in which we find ourselves. So by staying very firm with his teachings, by listening inside, so that we always can be guided from within, or more and more we can be guided from within, he can make a difference. And what I've noticed is that these many people he's been sending to, moving to work with me, I've been fascinated. Many of them are men who are employed in the world in many, many different work areas. They have many different occupations. And so they need to apply his teachings in all of those very different occupations. And it is beginning to come clear to me, just a little bit at a time. It wasn't a big revelation. Gradually, I've been able to watch what happens when we try to put his teachings into practice. It means that perhaps someone is a teacher in a college. Another would be a doctor in a hospital. Another one would be a businessman. And there are women too. But the majority of the ones that he's been sending recently are men who are out in the world, doing more out in the world than the women are. So that's the only reason I'm mentioning the men rather than the women. So don't get scared, women. He's got stuff for us to do in the material world, and I'll get to that in a minute. And as I watch it, I see that he's planting people in certain areas, and they have to be very strong, and they have to be willing to work out in their occupation his teachings. And more than that, it's going to be obvious that it works, because very few people in the world the way it is today, with the graft and all of the negativity, the cheating, the lying, all of the business dealings, they don't feel, generally speaking, that if you try to live a Christian life or a good life or a life according to Swami, they don't think you can be successful. But that's not the truth. And when we're willing to be strong enough and to be tuned in enough to the Baba in our heart, as he put it to me so long ago, then we can live according to his teachings, and we don't have to say a word about what we're doing. Our lives can then be his message in a smaller, very smaller, much smaller way, but similar to the way he says his life is his message. I know that when we first meet Baba, it's a huge temptation, and I fell under the same spell, to try to sell him to everybody. It doesn't work, as I'm sure you've found out. He has said he doesn't need anybody to advertise him. He doesn't need us to thrust him down people's throats or to flaunt him, because that's not what he teaches us. He says our lives should be his message. So many of the people he has sent to work with me, because he's been teaching me so long, not for any other reason. Let's face it, I'm a lot older than most of you, and I've been doing this work since the early 50s, long before I knew our beloved Lord was really doing it within me. So he has taught me a great deal, and it's now a joy to share all that he's been teaching. Now, finally, I say, thank you, Baba, instead of, please don't let me talk. So I would like in a few moments to open this whole meeting or this whole group to questions. But before I do that, there are 2 or 3 other things which are coming into my head. Sometimes they come in so fast that I have to say, Swami, slow it down. I've been talking about the men out in the world and how it is possible. It's been proved. There are lots of experiments now with some of the people he sent to me. For instance, we've just gone through the tax season in New York, in Los Angeles, and my husband was a tax lawyer, and he was the most honest man I have ever met. He was absolutely wonderful. Whatever case he took, he was not a liar, as Swami used to introduce some lawyers. He loves to introduce lawyers, liars. But my husband was extremely honest, and he was very successful. So in his own way, he brought proof that you can be honest, even if you're a lawyer. This time when I was in India, as I mentioned the other day, Swami introduced me as a very good and very well-known lawyer. So I think that it's a message for all of us, because if we think of ourselves only as a lawyer, or only as a teacher, or only as a mother, or only as a housewife, we are reducing to that role our whole identity, which is God. It's manifold. It's enormous if you think about it. And if we really do let the real self shine through more and more, we can be all of the things that we need to be. And though I always used to be so thankful that my husband was on the organization and I wasn't, and my husband was a lawyer and I didn't have to be, now that what's happened, is that my husband